Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Extra chapters. MENG's blind date. Tea-selling little sister, Part 3. On the day they first met at the Meowen Springs, due to the chaotic incident, Husky was so confused that he could not recall the details and thus could not explain things clearly. Combined with how poor his grasp of the local language was, he could only stutter his way when he was questioned and could not defend himself properly. As a result, he was thrown by the righteous Shikshan of Shi Shengpeak into Yanluo Hall to repent. As he was pushed and shoved around during the commotion, Husky's clothes got thrown and was lost into the Meowen Springs. The only clothing he had left on was his thin undergarments, his long golden hair was draped over his shoulders and his jade-like eyes were wide open. He stood helplessly in the hall of reflection where a banner hung that said, "My heart can be seen, life and death will not change it." He felt terribly wronged. "Let me out." Everyone's attitude towards him was very harsh and nobody would let him out. After a while, a senior disciple from Shi Shengpeak came to give him some outer robes and said, "Shizun said to give this to you." He also left him a book. Husky unfolded the robes and found that they were sets of female disciples' clothes. Then he looked at the book and saw that it was a volume of female virtues. The thing was, Husky had always been a very tolerant person and quite slow to anger. But this time, his throat was so clogged up that he almost choked on it. He knew that Shu County has its own custom just like how Taxu Palace had its own palace rules and regulations. He also understood that Shu County has its own practices. For example, he hated eating pork, but before they left, their Shizun at Minjiao Tower had warned them that the human realm was comprised of hundreds of different types of people and that perhaps, something he hated was something that someone else loved. Thus, Husky was taught to be respectful of others. So, he would never jump and yell gross, in front of someone who was happily eating roasted pig foot. He might feel disgusted inside, but he would still pass over salt and pepper to that person if he was asked. Then he would go home and wash his hands 100 times. But this Xiaozu was not respectful of others' differences at all. Not only did he not understand the adage that says, "It is a delight to have friends come from afar," but he even sent girls' robes and a book about female virtues to humiliate him. Didn't he just go to the wrong bathhouse by mistake? Couldn't they just talk things out? Why must they handle things so violently? Husky, a foreigner who had ventured into the outside world for the first time, couldn't understand it and didn't want to think about it anymore. And so, he silently kept the anger within his heart. It was nighttime and terribly cold, he was wearing only thin inner robes that was wet and stained with mud. Despite the shame, a good man knew better than to fight against insurmountable odds, so eventually, he put on the female robes that Xiaozu gave him. As for the book of female virtues, he didn't hesitate to throw it into the fire. The moment that the fire flared up, Husky promised darkly in his heart, he will remember today's disgrace, and when he get his hand over this Xiaozu, he'd kill him himself. However, the next morning brought even more humiliation. In accordance to the rules that was set down for the twin by their Shizun at this time, he would show himself for one day and the next day, it would be his brother's turn. Husky came over to Yanlu Hall to look for him. When it was time for them to switch identities, Husky was wearing the blue and silver female disciple's uniform of Shi Shengpeak. His blonde hair was loosely tied and he was sitting in a small dark corner. Husky asked, "What are you wearing?" Husky answered, "Ga, this is what you would be wearing today." "Come on, I've enjoyed them all night. These clothes actually smell pretty nice. Let's exchange quickly." Husky, his older brother, angrily hissed, "What trouble did you get into again this time?" Husky sometimes felt that his brother's life was truly tragic. Maybe it was just his bad luck, but every time he ran into a bad situation, the one who always ended up cleaning the mess was his brother. It was the same thing this time. The rage he felt at being forced into a girl's robe and being detained in Yanluo Hall for an entire night was justified, but the torment that his brother would have to suffer in the hands of Xiaozu was even more tragic. According to the disciples guarding the Yanluo Hall, as further punishment, he had to go to the library to clean and arrange the books. When Mei Hanshui was forced to wear that blue and silver female disciple's uniform, Mei Hangxiu thought he might go crazy. At that time, the younger Mei Hangxiu truly felt that if he gets his hands on Xiaozu, he would really kill him himself. When the older brother heard the whole story, he made a small correction to his brother's statement by removing the if. Mei Hanshui said frostily, "Just you wait. After I finish the work in the library, I'll kill him." Then he walked to the library with his short stubby legs. At that time, a group of arrogant Chikshan had accompanied them from Kunlun Taxiu Palace to visit Shisheng Peak. Since the sect leader favored Mei Hangxiu, they were very unhappy with him and looked for every opportunity to bully Mei Hangxiu. One of them was specifically awful. As soon as he heard that Mei Shidi had been disciplined by Shisheng Peak, he ran over to the library to rub it in. Seeing that Mei Shidi was actually wearing a female disciple's uniform as he stood on a small wooden ladder while dusting the books with a face that looked like it was made of the most bitter frost, he couldn't help but roared in laughter. And then he called over his cohorts of fellow scoundrels to join in humiliating him. "This isn't Mei Shidi, it should be Mei Shimei. You look quite lovely, ha ha ha. Just how did you provoke the people of Shisheng Peak to make them bully you like this? Tell Shikshan who this person is, ha 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 ha. Shikshan will gift them with flowers." Compared to his brother, Mei Hanshui was cold-natured and did not tolerate nonsense. Having been provoked, he immediately tried to hit back. However, he was still too small and hadn't learned many techniques yet. Moreover, he was a single boy facing a group of thugs, and thus before long, the ruffians had him pressed into the ground. These disciples did not know that Mei Hangxiu was actually a pair of twins, and so they yelled, "What's wrong with you? How come one day you're nice and polite, the next you're screaming about killing people? Do you need your Shikshan to fix that brain of yours? Strip him. He's from our Taxiu Palace. Why should he wear clothes from Shisheng Peak?" While he was struggling against the group, he heard the hiss of a passing blade. A long saber shining like snow had been thrown deep into the wooden floors. "What do you think you're doing?" The group of bullies from Kunlun Taxiu Palace were shocked. They immediately let him go and turned their heads to the newcomer. "Shui. Shui Meng." Upon hearing the name, Mei Hanshui shook aside his messy blonde hair that was covering his eyes and lifted his gaze. He saw a boy about his age standing by the library's doorway with his arms crossed. His face was elegant and his stance was domineering. He was wearing a full set of Shisheng Peak's signature blue armor, his hair was up in a ponytail with his dark-colored gloved finger impatiently tapping on top of his arms. Shui Meng said, ill temper evident, "Bullying people in my Shisheng Peak, did you get permission from my father? Have you asked permission from my Shizun? Did you ask me?" The disciples of Kunlun Taxiu Palace tried to laugh it off. "Aya, this is just us teaching a disobedient Chidi a lesson, he 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 he. You call this giving a lesson?" Shui Meng and stared and pointed at Mei Hanshui. "Shouldn't this be called a group of older disciples ganging up on a younger and weaker person?" "Ah, yes, you're right." Shui Meng retorted angrily, "Why are you still loitering around here? Scram." This group was comprised of bullies, but Shui Meng was the son of the sect leader. How could they dare to provoke him? They immediately bowed and bent, then scattered about like a flock of frightened birds. The expression on Shui Meng's face was quite serious as he stepped inside with his steel-reinforced boots which made the wooden floor creaked. Then he raised his hand and grasped Long Cheng. He wanted to pull it out in a cool manner, but when he tried to pull it out with one hand, it didn't budge. Shui Meng had to cough lightly in embarrassment, then used both hands with great force and breathed from his core before he managed to pull out the sword. The sword was as tall as he was, and he had to staggered back 2 steps when he managed to pull up the sword up. Shui Meng. Mei Han Shui. Shui Meng coughed awkwardly again and turned to look at Mei Han Shui. He didn't recognize that this was the dirty peeper yesterday from Miaoan Springs. Mei Han Shui naturally didn't recognize him either. They looked at each other for a moment. Shui Meng noticed that his golden hair was messy, there was blood at the corner of his mouth and his clothes were torn into unrecognizable shreds. Only a thin robe of frozen mist silk which was especially made by the Kunlun Taxia Palace remained on his body. Shui Meng couldn't help but wrinkle his brows. Despicable. As he said this, he took off his own outer robe and draped it over Mei Han Shui's shoulders. Put this on. Mei Han Shui draped over Shui Meng's robes, raised his head and looked carefully at this child's face. He didn't think he looked anything at all like his benefactor Shui Zhenyang. His face was small and delicate, his nose pointed, his apricot eyes were clear and distinct and he carried himself with a certain natural brilliance and pride. He said hesitantly, "So, you are Shui Meng?" "I am." Shui Meng confirmed, sounding pleased with himself. "What do you think of my skills? Don't you think my reputations was well deserved?" He was indeed the son of his benefactor after all. Mei Han Shui was about thank him but halted when he heard him laugh and declared, "Ever since this Shizun has gone out into the world, no one has managed to best me." Mei Han Shui. "You're Xiaozhu." Shui Meng, obviously. Isn't Xiaozhu a person's name? That night after Mei Han Shui returned to his room, Mei Hangxiu asked him this question with utter astonishment. How did he turn into our benefactor's son? As the older twin was steadier than his younger brother, he silently pulled from their luggage a book titled, Mandarin Translation Guide. The two brothers sat together and read the translation book under the light of a lamp. Xiaozhu, Mei Hangxiu pointed his finger and read word for word, refers to a young master. It can also refer to an adult master, the one that was designated as the heir is the Xiaozhu. Mei Hangxiu. Mei Han Shui. They fell into a long silence which was broken when Mei Hangxiu asked, "So, does this mean we can't kill him?" The elder brother thought about it for a bit. He looked down at the outer robe that he was wearing, lowered his long pale golden eyelashes and said coldly, "What do you think?" Mei Hangxiu sighed, his jade-like eyes are the same as those of an exotic cat as he said, "Fine, fine, I get it. But bullying him a bit should be alright, yes. No. Gee, look, you know how much he bullied me yesterday. No. He also made you wear a female disciple's robes." Mei Han Shui was silent for a short while until he finally conceded, "Fine, but don't go too far." After that, Mei Hangxiu would often take the initiative to look for Shui Meng. Gradually, the two children became playmates. In Mei Hangxiu's opinion, Shui Meng was too dumb. Him and his brother were exchanging with each other from one day to the next and yet he never noticed anything off. He only commented that Mei Hangxiu was temperamental. On the contrary, that little Shidi of his called Shimei whose actual name was Shui Ya, always looked as if he knew something was not right and would gaze at him contemplatively. Mei Hangxiu didn't like people with calculative minds like Shimei. Someone like Shui Meng who walked sideways like a crab and whose head wasn't too bright, that's the kind of person he liked to befriend as they were fun to tease. The only problem was, "You're not allowed to sleep with me today." Mei Hangxiu was clutching his bamboo pillow, dressed in silk sleeping robes with his soft blonde hair hanging down. He stared at Shui Meng with wide, sea-colored eyes. "Why?" Shui Meng answered furiously, "Because you kicked me out of bed in the middle of the night last night. Did you forget already?" Mei Hangxiu. Didn't his brother said he wouldn't bully Shui Meng? Why would he kick him out of bed in the middle of the night? Mei Hangxiu smiled. Although he had yet to grow up and hadn't yet developed the stunning looks he would become known for, there was already a trace of young Master Mei in this smile. "I won't kick you tonight. I'll sleep on the outside. If you still don't believe me, I can stick to you while you sleep." Mei Hangxiu's intentions was good. If he sticked with Shwemeng while they were sleeping, he would fall down, too. If Shwemeng fall, after all, close brothers should share all trials and tribulations. But the problem was, his grasp of the local language is not yet good, so when he said the last sentence, what Shwemeng heard was, "If you still don't believe me, I can lick you while you sleep." Lick him. Shwemeng was stunned, and upon picturing the image in his head, he couldn't help but throw a tiger pillow at him. Arg! Why are you people from Kunlun so perverted? Get out of here. It was because the young Mei Hangxiu has suffered so many times from Shwemeng because of his weak grasp of the local language that he realized from an early age that speech was such a splendid subject to strike up a conversation. And so, every time he found the opportunity, he would take the initiative to talk to the local girls, as he learned that girls have more patience than boys and were more than willing to teach him the nuances of the language. However, they would occasionally cry to him, "I don't think you like me at all. You're just with me to learn the local dialect." However, that was all in the past. Thinking about those past incidents, Mei Hangxiu couldn't help but laughed. As he curled his hands around his mouth to stifle his laughter, he heard the door creaked. He turned his head towards the sound. With the sunlight as background, Shwemeng's stand seemed to be very arrogant, yet he seemed somewhat uncertain as he walked toward him. Cough, hello. With an amenable expression, Mei Hangxiu smiled, lowered his legs that has been resting on the shelf, and sat up straight as he said, "Ah, the sect leader has come to visit." Shwemeng coughed again and agreed, "Yes. Does the sect leader have something he wishes to discuss with me?" Yes. Shwemeng didn't speak and just stalled for time. He looked at him and his face slowly turned red. Mei Hangxiu's smile froze and he began to feel a bit apprehensive. Mei Hangxiu is good at reading people, both men and women. Many fellow cultivators would have cheeks that would blossomed with rosy clouds when their gazes fell on him. He had a very clear idea of what this look meant. However, he never thought that Shwemeng would ever cast this look upon the cross-dressing him. Shwemeng was arrogant but honest, brimming with honor but lacked intelligence. He had never learned how to deal with the fairer sex. The thing he liked to do daily aside from martial arts training, was probably to admire himself in the mirror. To blush at a female cultivator, did he take the wrong medicine today? Even if this particular female cultivator was one he created himself, Mei Hangxiu still found the whole thing strange. It reminded him of the snow-white Persian cat that he had once raised at Taxiu Palace. He got it when it was just a tiny kitten and took care of it until it was fully grown. He found it innocent and cute and thought it would forever remain innocent and cute. Until one day, he saw his Persian cat mating with a wild cat. Not just with one, there were two cats piled on top of it and a third cat watching this incredible feat from the side. Mei Hangxiu was shocked. He couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. How did this happen? Where did the innocent, adorable, and silly kitten he raised go? Faced with a scarlet-cheeked Shwemeng, Mei Hangxiu found that what he was feeling was no different from what he felt at that time. Seeing Shwemeng's face get redder and redder while shifting awkwardly and repeatedly biting his lips only to release them as if he wanted to speak but kept stopping himself, Mei Hangxiu began to think about how to gently let him down in case Shwemeng really did confess to the Xiaohou. Should he tell him that she likes other women, or should he tell him that she has a terminal illness and would probably die on the next several months? These were some of the things he usually used when he needed to dump a woman. He had said these things so many times that he could make the words rain from his mouth like a deluge of heavenly flowers, but for some reason, this time he felt a bit faint. As he struggled with his convoluted thoughts, he heard the blushing sect leader Shwe said, "Cough, well, you have been in Shisheng Peak for a while now and I have something that I wanted to ask you." "Sect leader, please do ask." Mei Hangxiu's face remained calm and gentle, but his brain was actually buzzing. What should I do? How should I answer? Do I tell him I like women or that I'm terminally ill? Am I terminally ill or do I like women? Meng started to speak awkwardly. I just wanted to ask. Yes. Ahem, Meng gritted his teeth and shuffled his feet. Gathering his determination and sacrificing his thin face, he clenched his fist and shouted in one breath, "Excuse me. How did you manage to make Veggie Bun let you rub her belly without getting scratched?" End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Extra chapters. Meng's blind date. Tea-selling little sister, Part 4. Mei-Hangxiu. Meng's face was as red as the sunset. Mei-Hangxiu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. "Is that all?" Oh, Meng thought and remembered another thing that he meant to ask. "Also, how did you keep the disciples of Elder Tanlang and Elder Suanji from fighting?" Mei-Hangxiu. Please forgive him, he had thought too highly of Meng. He had analyzed thousands of people and therefore could claim that he has definitely never seen a man as exquisitely focused as Meng. Meng's life really did completely revolve around his physical prowess. In spite of all this, Mei-Hangxiu maintained his patience and told him how he mediated between Elder Tanlang and Elder Suanji's disciples. He also shared his knowledge of how to take care of pets with Meng. Cats are animals that needs to be disciplined. The more you indulge them, the less likely they would listen to you. Mei-Hangxiu smiled lightly, giving off a gentle aura and spoke in a kind tone. However, he still gave off a vague sense that he treated all living things with indifference. Sect leader, just because you think it's cute didn't mean you should spoil it completely. You need to handle it with firm hands, bully it a little bit. Let it know that you are the one in control and that it could not get the better of you. Only then would this fluffy little thing become obedient. But won't it run away? Mei-Hangxiu laughed and said, "Then chase it? What if it hid? Then find it? What if it bit? Then hit it?" During this verbal back and forth, Meng could see that there was a smile on this Xiaoho's face, yet for some reasons, he was getting goosebumps. He swallowed the knot in his throat and then said, "You didn't hit Veggie Bun, did you?" "Yeah." Mei-Hangxiu clasped his hands and held them up to his mouth as he smiled even more brilliantly. "Sect leader Xue is truly an honorable man. I was just joking. I may have coaxed people to do something, but I would never force anyone to do anything." When he heard this, Meng relaxed a little bit. If she didn't take it back, Meng would have thought that this Xiaoho was terrifying. After Mei-Hangxiu stopped laughing, he raised his pale eyelashes and with a mysterious expression, he began to speak, as if leading Meng down a new avenue. "But sect leader, now that you mentioned it, Dobao Manor has a unique technique for training cats. Would you be interested in hearing about it?" As a martial enthusiast, Meng was exceptionally curious about anything that was called unique technique. Mo Ran once thought that if he wanted to drag the incomparably pure Shueziming into reading porn, he would be able to do so as long as the title of those pornographic materials were something like Unique Techniques for Amorous Feelings and Unique Techniques for Romantic Encounters. No matter how stubborn and difficult he might be, Meng would take the bait. Mei-Hangxiu continued to smile as he said, "Well, would you like to learn about it? It's not something we would share to everyone. If it wasn't for the fact that I admire sect leader Xue so much, I would never be so willing to share this to outsiders." With the combinations of the cat's fluffy white belly and the words unique technique, Meng could not resist the temptation and finally jumped into the dubious trap laid out by Mei-Hangxiu. With a determined expression, he cleared his throat and said, "Ahem, well, since you sincerely offered, then I guess I'm willing to try it out." Thus, Mei-Hangxiu began his lecture. First of all cats have a certain natural instinct. Mei-Hangxiu started as he gazed at Meng with profound meaning. As the saying goes, curiosity kills the cat. Every cat's soft spot is related to its overly inquisitive nature and of having a heart that is not scared of danger. Meng stared transfixed, hungry for knowledge. "Really? Really?" Mei-Hangxiu raised one slender finger gracefully. You see, if people just stretched out a finger in front of them, 9 times out of 10, these little ones can't help but come close to take a sniff. Once they are near enough, then just quickly grab them, press them to the ground, lift open their legs, then they'll go weak. Next thing you know, they'll start yowling. Mei Hangxiu had intended to make a provocative sentence to incite Xue Meng into screaming and flailing. Unfortunately, even wise men make mistakes. The exceptionally pure Xue Meng didn't understand that the exceptionally lascivious Mei Hangxiu was teasing him. Instead, he listened attentively and asked, "Wouldn't it be unhappy then?" Mei Hangxiu was not successful in his endeavor, but he wasn't deterred, so he smiled and answered, "It might." "So, what then? Coax it?" Xue Meng waved his hand. "That wouldn't work. It can't understand human language." Mei Hangxiu said, "Speech is empty. Once you start moving, the kitty will start to find it pleasurable and stop resisting. Instead, it will want more, would adjust its body to better fit yours, and would start telling how nice it feels. Have you tried this before?" Xue Meng held his chin and pondered, "So, they'll start to make a purring sound." As Mei Hangxiu looked at his ignorant countenance, he found that the itch to tease him grew ever stronger. He couldn't help but laugh as he answered, "Yes, that's what cats sound like. But every time I try to touch its belly, it resists. At most, it only let me touch its chin." "That's because you weren't using the correct technique and you are petting it wrongly." Mei Hangxiu's soft eyelashes twitched. After a while, he said gently, "If the sect leader won't mind, may I take the liberty of teaching him hands-on?" Although propriety dictated that there shouldn't be direct contact between unrelated men and women, exceptions could be made in order to provide practical instruction and to clarify any confusion. Besides, Xue Meng knew that this lady Xiaohou was so gentle and refined, dignified but warm, and was an honorable person. So, he hesitated only for a while and then nodded his assent. However, when Mei Hangxiu started to reach for his hand, Xue Meng still shouted in a rush, "Wait! Wait! Hold on a second. What's wrong? I just want to make things clear. I'm just here to learn how to pet a cat and have no other intentions toward you." Mei Hangxiu laughed and said aloud, "All right," and secretly added in his mind, "And I definitely have no intention of doing anything physically immoral." Mei Hangxiu laughed so hard that his ribs almost cracked, his eyes brimming with tears. When he finally sorted himself out, he said, "Why are you so nervous? If nothing else, I am still a disciple of Dobeao Manor, which is a reputable and honorable sect. I don't plan on doing anything immoral like jump on you, let alone make you take responsibility for my honor just because of a few touches. Sect leader, there's no need to be so defensive." Xue Meng cleared his throat in embarrassment. "Ahem, all right. I guess we can start then." Mei Hangxiu shifted to the side to make space for Xue Meng and said, "Sect leader, please come closer first." When Xue Meng approached, Mei Hangxiu raised his hand and said seriously, "Listen, when you see a cat, you should first approach it slowly. Then let it freely sniff your fingertip to entice its curiosity." As he said this, his fingertip brushed at Xue Meng's nose, paused for a moment, then slid it down to Xue Meng's chin, and then, "You can gently scratch it a little." Mei Hangxiu was aware of Xue Meng's temperament, so he didn't keep their contact too long, only giving him the slightest touch while he snickered in his heart, "Ayya, Xue Meng didn't swat my hand away." Not only didn't he strike out, but probably because Mei Hangxiu's Xiaohou performance was immaculate, that Xue Meng didn't even think to be suspicious and even copied him in scratching his own chin for a few times. "Like this. Use a bit more force. You should vary the force a little bit. There's one very good technique called *9 shallow 1 deep. Once you master this, you'll find it impossible to give up." "What kind of technique is that? How come I've never heard of this before?" Note, in case it wasn't obvious enough, it's a thrusting technique. Mei Hangxiu held back laugh and said, This is a highly advanced skill, ordinary technique guides would not mention it. Shuemeng was annoyed and said, "You got to be kidding me. I'm the sect leader of the prestigious Shi Sheng Peak. Do you really think there are any advanced techniques out there that I haven't seen before? I guarantee that you haven't seen this one before." Shuemeng refused to accept this and raised his black eyebrows and said, "How would you know? Show me. Let's spar." Mei Hangxiu replied, "I am indeed quite proficient in this particular skill, but I'm afraid that it would be respectful if I were to recklessly use the technique on sect leader Shui." After a pause, he noticed that Shuemeng still looked like he wanted to stubbornly argue. If they continued down this road, he was afraid that he might let something slip. Therefore, Mei Hangxiu giggled and said, "Sect leader, there's no need for you to fret so much over this technique. 9 shallow and 1 deep is a bit of cheat and not something that anyone could master. It just doesn't suit some people physically. I personally think that although your Shizun, Grandmaster Chu has experienced a masterful version of this many times, his nature prevents him from being able to practice the technique himself." When he said this, Shuemeng reluctantly gave up but grumbled still, "Since my Shizun can't learn it, it can't be anything amazing." Mei Hangxiu laughed and said, "Grandmaster Chu didn't master it, but Grandmaster Mo is most certainly skilled at it." Shuemeng's eyes grew wider. "Mo Ran? How come I've never heard that he knew something like this?" Motivated by a wicked desire to watch the world burn, Mei Hangxiu smiled, eyes crinkling, and said, "He who has treasure won't show it casually. Next time you see him, why don't you ask him if the sensation of using this technique isn't something especially wonderful?" Shuemeng was suspicious, but he kept the matter in his mind and decided to indeed ask Mo Ran the next time the opportunity to see him came. Just what on earth is this 9 shallow 1 deep technique? So mysterious. The two of them spent some more time practicing the proper technique for petting a cat. Shuemeng scratched himself a few times, more or less grasping the appropriate strength to use, and said happily, "Not bad. I think I got it now. What's next?" Next, Mei Hangxiu's white jade fingertip slowly slid down and finally landed on Shuemeng's stomach, hovering over the silver lion's head armor at his waist. "Now that you've made the cat feel good, it will lie down and show you its belly, which means that it's starting to trust you. So, can I touch it at this point?" "Not yet," Mei Hangxiu smiled. "You must be patient. You have to do what I'm doing right now and stop around its belly without actually making contact." As he spoke, his hand gently hovered languidly around the area of Shuemeng's stomach. As time went by, Shuemeng began to feel a little tense and stared at the hand, wondering when exactly it would touch him. But even after a long while, Lady Xiaoho still kept the distance, and so he slowly let his guard down. "Just like this?" Shuemeng nodded. "Oh." Unexpectedly, at this moment, Mei Hangxiu suddenly grabbed him by his waist and pulled him close as he laughed and said, "Then you just take it by surprise." Mei Hangxiu didn't manage to say how he would be taken. Because Shuemeng was utterly taken by surprise to be grabbed by his waist, he wasn't able to brace and defend himself against the trick. He was pulled forward and was thrown towards Mei Hangxiu, which sent them both tumbling down. Fuck. Mei Hangxiu felt a weight pressing directly on him. Accustomed to acting protectively towards the fairer sex, he instinctively held Shuemeng and kept him on top. Unsteadily, the two of them fell to the ground. There was a loud but muffled thump. The thin layer of dust covering the surface of the library puffed up in a cloud, choking Shuemeng and making him cough uncontrollably, his eyes tearing up. The library's ancient wooden floorboards creaked and groaned under their weight. Like a perplexed cat, Shuemeng sat in a daze, a blank look of confusion on his face, and it was only after quite some time that he realized that he was pressing Mei Hangxiu against the floor. "Mei Hangxiu." Shuemeng, cough. Cough. Ack. I'm so sorry. He waved his hands back and forth to fan away the dust cloud, and only then did he notice that Mei Hangxiu's clothes were in disarray and his hair was coming loose. A pair of pale eyes looked at him with a somewhat strange expression from under long curling eyelashes, as if there was something that needed to be said but couldn't be. Shwemeng was stunned. He suddenly realized how inappropriate their position was and stood up in a rush. However, the more nervous the person was, the more likely he was to make a mistake. Flustered and in rush to stand up, he fell unsteadily on his feet, and during his first few attempts to stand up, he found himself rubbing against Mei Hangxiu. Mei Hangxiu's eyebrows raised just the tiniest bit and his expression grew just a bit weirder. After finally managing to get up, Shwemeng's face was fully flushed with embarrassment. He stuttered, de daja, I'm truly, sorry. Because of his temperament, Shwemeng has never had good fortune with the fairer sex from an early age. The girls of his generation never liked dealing with him. Instead, his countenance invited fondness from older girls and aunties. Therefore, Shwemeng developed a habit of addressing women in two ways only, one is ye and the other was ji. So, in his nervousness, he addressed Mei Hangxiu, who was disguised as a pretty young lady, as Daja. Mei Hangxiu looked at him with an air of profound incredulity and sighed in his heart. It served this person right that even at his age, he hasn't even properly held a lady's hand. What kind of stupid address is Daja? When addressing the fairer sex, those 90 years or older should be called Xiangwu, those 5 years or younger should be called Meitbun, while those in between, whether fat or skinny, should be collectively called Myron. How could Shwemeng not learn this simple lesson after having been alive for almost 30 years? Meanwhile, Shwemeng was still stuttering, Daja, I didn't hurt you, did I? I don't think I'm that heavy, and you look pretty sturdy. Mei Hangxiu thought that if the person in front of Shwemeng was an actual lady, Shwemeng would have received multiple slaps on the face by now. Fortunately, Shwemeng seemed to finally realize how inappropriate it was to describe a girl sturdy and awkwardly tried to correct himself. No. I didn't mean it like that. I just felt that you probably won't break with a single tap since you have some muscles in you. Arg. I probably should stop talking now. Anyways, are you alright? Mei Hangxiu remained laying on the ground for a while. Then he sat up, his face had a complicated expression in it as he responded, I'm alright. I just didn't think that you would react that extreme. After an awkward silence, Mei Hangxiu asked, did I frighten you? No way. Shwemeng was still blushing violently and didn't know what else to say. He stalled for a long time, then changed the subject, ahem, so that's how you managed to tame Veggie Bun. Yes, Mei Hangxiu said with faint smile, of all the pets I've trained, there isn't one of them who isn't obedient. Oh. The technique we went over just now, does the sect leader gets it? Shwemeng, yes, pretty much. Mei Hangxiu said, that's good. As long as sect leader is satisfied, then falling down was worth it. Shwemeng was flabbergasted. To have these words gently said by such a beautiful lady, any normal man would feel a great sense of relief come all over his body. So, despite himself, Shwemeng's heart began to stir. Although he didn't think very highly of Ma Yun, who crafted that stupid sorrow-relieving scroll, this Xiaoho disciple of his wasn't too bad. She was calm, even-tempered, unpretentious, and moreover, honorable and steady in her profession, and was dedicated to the needs of her clients. Shwemeng used to think that these pretty delicate little girls were made of glass. That they were weak and easy to hurt, and would cry and scream over any little thing. If a man dumped them, they would either grind their teeth or stomp their feet, start wailing pitifully or scream hysterically something like, "This is harassment. You scoundrel." But this lady Xiaoho, in order to convince him to change his mind about the sorrow-relieving scroll, didn't even oppose to be taken advantage of. Of course, he didn't intentionally try to take advantage of her, but the kind-hearted Shwemeng couldn't help but develop a deep feeling of pity towards this poor girl who had to make a living by being submissive and docile. So, he hesitated only for a moment before finally saying, "Well, what do you know, it's almost time for dinner." Why don't I take you for a meal? Mei Hangxiu smiled and said, sect leader merely bumped into me. There's no need to feel so guilty. No. It's thanks for teaching me your unique techniques for petting cats. Xuemeng was still blushing with embarrassment. As for my opinion on that sorrow-relieving scroll, well, we can talk about it. Anyways, we should eat first. And so, he extended his hand towards the person whom he viewed as the pitiable tea-selling little sister, Lady Xiaoho, with the intent of helping her up. Yet Mei Hangxiu didn't move, his gaze turned from Xuemeng's palm to his face. Finally, he said, sect leader, you can go first. I will sit here for a while longer. Seeing this reaction, Xuemeng couldn't help a bit lost. Did I actually hurt you badly just now? Mei Hangxiu raised his eyebrows silently but then smiled finally. It's not that bad. There's just a bit of swelling but it should be fine soon. As long as you don't rub on me again, it should go down soon. When the kind Xuemeng heard that he had actually hurt this delicate maiden, he couldn't help but feel guiltier. So, it's like that, Xuemeng bit his lip in embarrassment. Then how about I find Elder Tanlang so he could take a look at you? There's no need. I hate to disturb others with something like this. Xuemeng's impression of how forlorn yet prudent she was, grew even stronger. Then, can you tell me where it's swollen? I have some medicine on me, maybe I could put some on you? Or maybe I could massage it a little, if you would be alright with that. Looking at his earnest expression, Mei Hangxiu wondered more and more how could this person be this cute. He used his utmost energy to resist laughing and simply kept silent, fearing that once he opened his mouth, he wouldn't be able to resist slapping his legs and howl into laughter. However, in Xuemeng's eyes, Mei Hangxiu looked like a lady with quivering lips and eyes brimming with tears, unable to speak the words she wanted to say. This lady just looked at him, and the tighter she pursed her lips, the more inexplicable her expression became. Finally, she bowed her head and said with a light cough, if you massage it, it might just swell up more. Xuemeng asked in surprise, does my hand seem poisonous to you? No. Then, it should be fine, right? At the beginning, Mei Hangxiu had been looking at Mo Ran's erotic drawing and had been having a similar reaction as when someone was rubbing against him. Such reaction need not further explanation as to why it happened. However, when he looked at Xuemeng's pure and innocent appearance, the itch to tease him grew worse and worse, as in he really wanted to see him run away in terror or to have him screaming and cursing with rage. Just then, they heard a resolute knocking on the library's door. Mei Hangxiu raised his eyebrows and closed his mouth. Xuemeng turned his head and saw Elder Suanji in by the library's entrance, hands poised in the motion of knocking at the door. Sect leader, as Elder Suanji spoke, he saw Mei Hangxiu behind Xuemeng and smiled, oh, Lady Xiaoho was here, too. Mei Hangxiu smiled and nodded. Yes, I was discussing something with her. Unaware of how precarious his situation just then, Xuemeng asked pompously, what's the matter? Elder Suanji reported, we have a situation. Mei Han Shui of Kunlun Taxu Palace has paid us a sudden visit. He said there was an urgent matter involving you. He is now waiting in Loyalty Hall. Upon hearing that, Mei Hangxiu's smile froze. End chapter.